Hey, Margie here. Did you know that by taking steps to improve the health of your gut, not only will you improve your bones, but you'll also improve your brain? And what that means is reducing your risk of getting Alzheimer's or dementia. The gut is involved with so many parts of our health. And I'm really excited because we're going to delve into this today with our very special guest, Dr. Partha Nandi. And Dr. Nandi is a practicing gastroenterologist and a renowned speaker. He's the creator and host of the internationally syndicated medical lifestyle television show, Ask Dr. Nandi. He's also the chief health editor at WXYZ ABC in Detroit. And his mission is to be your own health hero. And that's at the heart of everything he does, to empower individuals worldwide to take charge of their health. His latest book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, delves into the crucial connection between gut health and cognitive function, offering practical advice and insights drawn from his extensive medical expertise and personal experiences. And that's what he's going to share. He's going to share some of the highlights of his book and some of the concepts that we can all put into our lives that will really make a difference for our gut as well as our overall health. So this is full of lots of great information. So stay tuned. Welcome, Dr. Nandi. So happy to have you here on the podcast.
Margie, thank you for having me. It's quite a pleasure and an honor.
You know, this topic of the gut and what you do as a gastroenterologist is so important. And it's always when people ask me, well, where do I start when we look at root causes? I always say you have to start with the gut because we can't miss this piece because it's just so important for our bones, but also for our overall health. So I'm just so glad that you're joining me today. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. You're right. But I'm biased. I'm a ringer because I'm a gastroenterologist. I always thought that the gut is the center of everything. But now we have some evidence to show that it does, which is exciting.
Yeah. You want to just go into that a little more? Like, why is it that the gut, it's so funny because years ago, some people said that, but now we truly know there's so much research. Do you want to just elaborate on that a little more?
100%. And I'll tell you, I write about this in my book, Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. And what I talk about is this, that, for example, one of the biggest things we talk about in gut health is the microbiome. Right? The microbiome has been around for 15 million years, way before we were in anything, before we were even, in the form that we're in, even before there were eukaryotes, which is like, these little one-celled organisms. So we have these bugs, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, fungi that existed way before us. And as an evolution, they basically decided to figure out ways to communicate with other cells because they said, okay, if we communicate with them, maybe we can work together. And then as we grew in evolution and we became these creatures and started incorporating these bugs, you can still see the same signaling, right? The same signaling that these bugs have in very, very primitive organisms in our gut. And so what does that all have to do with your question is that we know that the gut has this communication with these bugs and microbiome for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And this communication system is symbiotic, right? So which means that we help each other. We're these big lumbering creatures that walk around, we feed these guys and gals, trillions of them, right? And then we poop them out so they can travel everywhere. And they need us and we need them because through these thousands of years, we've set up signals where they make products or metabolites. We call them postbiotics. I'll go into that in a little bit more details to be able to affect our health. So the gut affects really every organ. For me, I'm especially interested in talking about the gut and the brain. It's a personal reason because my dad, and then we talked about this before we got on the show, is that my dad was the biggest hero. He was larger than life to me, right? Because he was this very accomplished, amazing genius. I'll give you a quick example. If you drive down the road at night and you see these little white reflective tape that's at the end of at the side of the road, my dad made that. So he saved countless of lives doing what he did, countless lives doing what he did. And so when he had a stroke, I was a doctor by then. I was a practicing physician. My dad suddenly had a stroke, totally healthy, Margie, never been hospitalized, no problems, ate pretty well, maybe had some stomach issues once in a while, but otherwise really, really good. And then he had the stroke, and that stroke took away a decade, the last decade of his life. It didn't allow him to play with his grandkids, didn't allow him to have the pleasure of being able to impart his amazing wisdom. I mean, he was a great cook. He was a singer. This guy was like a Renaissance man. He wasn't able to give that to my children or enjoy that where he should have. And so I always thought to myself, when he had the stroke, and then finally when he died from consequences or complications of the stroke, I said, what could I have done differently? I thought I was a pretty good doctor, that I was an empathetic person. I said to myself, what could I have done? At the time, this is probably 2007-ish, and I didn't have the information that I do now. I didn't know what I could have done. But if I had the knowledge then, what I have now, I would have asked him at that time to really look at his gut health, because we know the gut impacts the brain in multiple ways, three main ways, right? The vagus nerve, and many of your listeners and viewers know about this, but it's the connection. It's a superhighway between the gut and the brain. This nerve basically transmits messages. And I compare it to teenagers that are really talking about what happened at the Taylor Swift concert. They're constantly talking to each other. They're texting, they're doing all kinds of messaging. So it's a bidirectional message between the gut and the brain. We also know that there are neurotransmitters, so fancy language for chemicals that really go to the brain from the gut that help you feel good or not feel good. One of the things that you may or may not know, your audience may or may not know, is serotonin's produced. 95% of it is in the gut. That's your feel-good hormone. There's so many drugs, right? We talk about pharmacology that try to increase serotonin so that you can feel good. Well, if you don't take care of your gut, you ain't making enough serotonin. And the third way is really the gut wall and its integrity. And you may have discussed this before, Margie. It's leaky gut, right? So in Western medicine, I'm also a traditional gastroenterologist, not just a functional gastroenterologist. We have a fancy name for it. It's called intestinal permeability. That gives it credibility, because leaky gut, for years, people just roll their eyes. Traditional doctors would roll their eyes when you said leaky gut. Now we have another name for it. It's called intestinal permeability. But that's the third way the gut affects everything else. How does it do that? Because between stool and blood is one cell layer thick, right? One cell layer thick. And that cell layer has to protect you from stuff in the poop going in the blood. And if it doesn't, if it has little tiny, little openings or crevices, you won't get big chunks of things going through. But even little tiny solutes, even little tiny pieces of bacteria can begin inflammation. That inflammation, if it continues, it then goes to other parts of the body. One of the main places it goes to is the brain. The brain has this blood-brain barrier. Another place, the brain does not like a lot of company. It likes to be isolated in its own little environment. But when you crack that barrier by increasing inflammation, what I mean by inflammation is that when you have these little things that go from inside the gut, inside this, where the stool is, into the blood, it creates an inflammatory system where every part of your kind of protective mechanisms, your body. So imagine your Army, your Navy, your Air Force, your CIA, everybody comes to attack it. We have cells that are equivalent to that, meaning the metaphors are, we have cells that increase inflammation. That inflammation, when it's a real threat, like a bug or something else we need, is affected. But when it's just a particle of something that's in your blood that's not supposed to be there, and it continues that way, it can damage that blood-brain barrier. Then when the blood-brain barrier is not effective, that inflammation begins in the brain, and you have diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, even increased incidence of stroke that took my dad's life can increase. I mean, the thing is, my patients are most afraid, and I don't know what your listeners think, but my patients are most afraid of a disease called Alzheimer's. I mean, they're even worried about it sometimes more than death, because people hate the fact if you lose your mind, then, that's the biggest fear they have. Every 3 seconds, we know that somebody is diagnosed with dementia. Every 6 seconds, someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Every 4 minutes, someone dies of a stroke. So this is a huge problem. And to me, what I love, Margie, about the fact that the gut is the center, and you can do something about it. It's not just in your destiny that my dad had it, or my mom had it, or my aunts had it. You can control it because you can change the health of your gut.
I love that you're bringing this out in the open because most people, yes, you are absolutely right. Most people are terrified about, losing or dementia or Alzheimer's. People are just so worried about losing their cognitive function as well as their bone health and falling and having a fracture but the thing is they don't think, oh my gosh, that if I take care of my gut, that could actually prevent, Alzheimer's or dementia. Nobody really, the average person does not make that connection. I don't think people think about that. They may think about, okay, I'll play the crosswords or I'll make sure I stimulate. A lot of people do things like that to keep their brain healthy, but not realizing that if we go deeper and work on the gut, that there can be profound, really make a big difference. So I love in your new book that you are, sharing this information so that people can take action and make a big difference. I think this is just so great.
And when we talk about, all these sayings, right? I have butterflies in my stomach. I have a gut feeling. It used to be just these sayings, but now we know the gut is the second brain. It has the most complex neurological system. Can you imagine that? We used to think the gut as a dumb organ. Dumb in the sense that, food goes in, you digest it, and you poop it out, and that's it. And now we see that the gut has millions of neurons within its wall, right? Within the walls of the gut. And I'm sure you've talked about this. Like the gut wall to me is like almost like the layers of an onion, right? There are multiple tiny layers, and one of the layers are the nerves that really line the gut. And I think we also have to nourish the gut and make sure that the gut health is appropriate for those nerves to be working appropriately, as I talked about, the communication system. And you said a very important thing, right? While you are taking care of your gut to help your brain, guess what? Your bone health is also being optimized, because the same factors that improve your gut health is also, it doesn't just say, well, I'm going to improve our brain and not the rest of our body. We work in concert. That's the beautiful thing about it, is that when you do the things we talk about for gut to improve the brain, you also have lots of side effects, which are positive, like great heart health, great bone health, decreasing in autoimmune conditions. I mean, the list goes on. And we used to know this. I mean, this is not new. When you look at Ayurvedic medicine, you look at ancient Greek medicine, ancient Egyptian medicine, we all saw there's evidence. At least the medical scholars would say, you've got to look at the gut. And then we've forgotten that because, now we got a drug, we got a procedure, you got a pill we got to take, you got an injection you can do, right? And you forget about the basics that helped us thrive and survive when other creatures did not. And so I think it's important to come back to that. So I'm so happy that you're talking about it with me.
Yes. And I think even the best thing, I always look at like a diagnosis of osteoporosis as an opportunity to stop, see what's going on. And then when you work on like the gut, all of a sudden everything gets better, just like you said. But I've seen just the opposite, where people are doing, they find out there's an issue and they're worried about it because of their bones. And all of a sudden brain fog is better. Their anxiety and depression are better. Things totally change, which I don't think people think if they have, you mentioned that there's this relationship. If they have anxiety and depression, that maybe that could be a problem, with my gut. So I think that's just so interesting that research has shown that now.
100%. And I think that the most important thing is that we can make actionable changes in the gut, right? So there are a lot of things that we in medicine, we say, this is the factor, but it's some unpronounceable thing. And well, you just put your hand up in the air and say nothing you can do about it, right? We used to think about, for example, you have this genetic predisposition or increased risk for it. I think that with the gut, it's so nice. I break it down into something I call the 5 pillars of gut health. And so I'll go through that with you. And I think some of it's intuitive, right? Some of it makes sense, but some of it's, you have to really think about it. So the first thing I talk to my patients about is purposeful living. And so people say, what does that have to do with gut health, right? Well, when you have purpose in your life, not less than, I think, a half a dozen studies have shown that you decrease some of the most common diseases that kill you. like heart disease, cancer, stroke. I mean, it goes on and on. And so what's the connection? To me, it's really about when you have purpose-driven living, you have less unrest. You have more focus. When you have less unrest, then you have less cortisol, less unopposed inflammation. When you have less unopposed inflammation, guess what happens to your gut health? The gut wall integrity is better. Your microbiome is better. And when your microbiome is better, remember, little terminology, when your microbiome I talked about before, those are your kind of your probiotics. And people talk about probiotics. Those are the bugs that are in your microbiome that make up the microbiome. Then there are prebiotics, right? Prebiotics are the food for these bugs. Then there are postbiotics. Those are the products that these bugs make to be able to enhance your life. So one of the things that happen when you have purpose-driven life, you create an environment for a healthy microbiome. You have not inflammation taking up so much of your energy, not inflammation that making your gut wall integrity less. You have not as much inflammation to screw up your gut immune system. So it may seem like a simple step, but to me, in my life, it's been the hardest thing I've ever done to have a purpose-driven life. And I don't mean, how am I going to pay my, my car bill or a house bill or make the next whatever. It's talking about what really gives me purpose to jump out of bed in the morning, right? And it's a hard thing to do. Now we all, all of us hopefully are meeting our basic needs. So I have to give that preface. If you're not meeting your basic needs, if you're in some place that you can't even meet your basic needs, obviously that's your purpose. That's why when we were hunters and gatherers, right, Margie, we didn't need to talk about purpose because our purpose was survival. We wanted to, have lunch and not be lunch. And so we had very basic, but we were purposeful living. Now people have most of their needs met and they struggle to find, hey, what is it that I want? So many people are not happy with their jobs, their lives, their marriages, whatever it is. So I asked all of you to even spend even a few minutes every day to find out, hey, what are the things I did today that really give me purpose, really drive me? And what are the ones that don't? Like the things I do, like, for example, picking up your phone and looking at TikTok for an hour and a half. I mean, come on. I mean, I've seen people do this constantly. So many of my patients looking at social media and scrolling, looking at somebody else's life to find, some meaning in yours. And it's important to talk about this. The first pillar is having a purpose-driven life. And I talk about it in my Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain book. I talk about how you could try to incorporate purpose in your life. That's the first pillar. The second one.
Wait, I have to stop you here because my ears are just, I teach a whole happiness program, and that's one of the whole entire, one of the classes is all on finding your passion and purpose. And I couldn't agree more. People underplay that. They don't realize that this is life-changing. But to hear it from you as a gastroenterologist, that is your first pillar, I just think that's incredible. And I always tell people to ask the question, what makes you come alive? Because so often, we're just sort of, you'll ask someone how their life is, I'm getting by. But we're not meant to get by. We're meant to thrive. So I just want to tell you, I love that. So continue. That's fantastic.
I love that you talk to people about that. Very few people do because it's, I'll be honest, it's so woo-woo to people. Like, wait a minute, I want some stuff here. People are so primed in our culture, and maybe other cultures now too, because the Western culture is ubiquitous. It's like, give me something, give me a prescription, give me a pill, give me some, some regimen. But sometimes it's a little bit more and you have to think beyond it. And then you can be prescriptive about trying to get habits on purpose-driven living. And when, I talk about that in the book, but I'm so happy you agree with me. The second pillar is a little bit more intuitive, Margie. So lots of people understand that kind of what you put in your mouth makes a difference. So my second pillar is a nutrition plan. And I'm careful not to use the word diet. To me, diet's a synonym for failure. I don't know of a single diet, maybe the Mediterranean diet, but anything else, it's really a synonym for failure. So what I mean is that how can we nourish your gut and nourish the microbiome that's in your gut? And to me, it's pretty simple. I like simple concepts. So I just tell my patients and our family as well, it's how we live, right? Whole foods, have plant-based as much as possible, not super hard, right? And try to avoid things that are simple carbohydrates, right? So stuff that's sweet and maybe not sweet. but are simple carbs that are especially processed. And also, we don't talk about this enough, but bad fats, right? To me, having a pepperoni pizza is kind of like the atomic bomb. Well, listen, I'm a real person. I have kids and I go to birthday parties and I don't give them a list ahead of time saying these are my preferred foods and I won't come unless you give that to me. I don't do that. But, and I follow almost an 80-20 rule in essence. If you can go 95-5, that's great. But 80% of the time, we try to eat whole plant-based foods, have as much fermented foods in every one of my meals as I can, try to avoid simple carbohydrates and bad fats that you can see that, are that when you go out to fast food restaurants, when you go out to restaurants. And so I talk about a little bit more detail in the book, but essentially we don't probably go out even one time a week to go eat outside. Because to me, when you go out to eat, their job is not to be able to help you with your health. To me, it's a crisis. That's not something that's, oh, well, when I think about it, I'll do it. It's really so important to be consistent with your food plan. One of my favorite sports heroes, I don't know if you're a sports fan, Margie, but Tom Brady. He said, I'm not really that much more talented than anybody else, but what I am is consistent. So be consistent every day with a food plan that your gut wants, right? So, and let me talk about fermented foods for just a minute. Fermented foods helps you feed the microbiome with more good stuff, more good bacteria that you don't already have. And so if you like sauerkraut, if you like yogurt, if you like kimchi, if you like tepache, there's so many foods, kefir. If you just look up fermented foods, try to incorporate that into your diet. That makes a huge difference. Stay hydrated. It's a rule of thumb, 64 ounces of water a day, but if you have health conditions, obviously you want to be able to maybe talk to your practitioner, but if you can do 64 ounces of water a day, that'd be fantastic. But that just using those simple principles, if even 50% of our country did that, we would have half of the health problems we do. And my right now, my list to see somebody in the office is probably about 2.5 months, right? So it's a problem. Gastrointestinal issues are such a big problem. And I'm one gastroenterologist. Imagine there are thousands in the country and they're all having the same issues. So when the second pillar to me is so important that you use nutrition to really be up your weapon, and the fork being your ultimate weapon against gut disease. That's the second pillar. The third one to me is movement. Right? We are creatures of movement, and we've always moved, and that really helps us. Now, how does that help your gut health? So movement does something very basic, right? So remember, the gut is a muscular organ, right? Its job is to do this very coordinated function called peristalsis. Is one of the things that it does to move things along. That clearance of the materials in your gut is really important to not have too many bugs in one place, too little in some places. It also helps your gut get in wall integrity and everything that goes along with it to function properly. When you move, you also do something pretty interesting, which is called energy homeostasis. So in English, that means your gut is getting the right amount of energy to be able to nourish the right microbiome, the right environment for your gut to flourish. Remember, when you don't give the gut the right environment, the right amount of energy, the right amount of food to function, it thinks you're almost in a crisis mode, or a mode where you are deprived of something. And remember, the gut is not an essential organ, so it diverts energy away to other organs like your brain, like your heart, like your lungs to survive. So when you're moving, when you're in homeostasis, when you're in balance, the gut then also follows, and its health is optimized. And so that's my third movement. The caveat I'll give you with movement is this: there are people that I work in a medical facility where there are windows, and I can watch right next to me is this giant fitness place, and I love watching lots of vultures, and people say, you're in Detroit, how do you find vultures? Well, I see these vultures, these guys and gals in their little cars, and circle around the entire parking lot in order to find the closest place to the entrance, because they don't want to walk a single extra step. If somebody could even grab them, take them and place them on their treadmill would be utopia. That'd be the perfect thing. But really, it's not. It's not utopia, right? It's not about just getting to the gym. It's about purposeful movement. When I play, I have a 4, 10, and a 12-year-old. When I play with my kids and I'm running around with them out of breath, that's purposeful movement. I'm getting joy. I'm also, doing all the things I want to move my body, but I'm doing it in a purposeful way. If you're digging a garden, right, and you're making vegetables and you're cultivating your soil, that brings that joy and it's purposeful. So try to find movements that are purposeful, not just random movements that you say, oh God, I go to the gym again. Then think of what message you're giving to the rest of your body. And that's one of unrest. When you give your body the message that you're not one with it, it creates unrest. And even though it's better than not doing anything at all, remember, it's still not as effective as when your body's in flow and you're loving the movement, you're loving what you're doing, because then you're also adding your fourth pillar. And my fourth pillar is what? It's spirituality, right? So it doesn't mean when I have spirituality, people say, well, doc, I don't want to pray. I'm not religious. Forget about that. Doesn't mean that you have to pray. If you want to pray, that's great. I pray. That's great for me, but it doesn't mean that's what you have to do. I also meditate. But anything you can do that gives you your feeling of what your place is in this planet, in this universe, and how you fit in, to me, that's my simplest definition of spirituality. And that could mean taking a walk on the beach if you live there, or taking a walk even in your garden, or doing Tai Chi or yoga or praying, meditation, whatever it is. If you can incorporate spirituality in your life, and to me, if you can have spirituality and movement together in a place like yoga, man, that's ballgame. So spirituality also helps, and we know independent studies that show associations with gut bacteria that actually are helpful in producing short-chain fatty acids. You're decreasing the inflammation in your body, you're decreasing the unrest when you have spirituality. And you can see translations of this in the business world, in the sports world. If you talk to Michael Jordan, almost everybody knows who he is, right? Michael Jordan will tell you his transformation from just being a great player to a champion involved having spirituality. Now, he won't tell you that it goes back to your gut and your brain and how it all works together. But spirituality is my fourth pillar, and it's super important. My last one is really apropos to what you're doing. It's a community. Your community is just loves what you do and loves the information and also the sense of belonging that they have. Community is so important for overall health, but especially gut health. There's a study, and you may be familiar with it, and your listeners may also. It's called the Rosetto effect, right? Rosetto, Pennsylvania, 1950s. A group of Italian immigrants were just living their lives, and a physician came and he was vacationing, or he happened to stumble upon this community, and he found something startling. RG, and he found out that in the 1950s, nobody was getting heart attacks in this community. People are living to their 90s without, not 90s in a nursing home with a catheter all over, 90s thriving in their community. And he tried to find out what was going on in this community that really made them special. And the only thing that they isolated was community together. So these folks, actually when they came home from work, they said, how you doing? And nowadays, if you say how you doing and somebody says more than just I'm doing okay, you cringe because you don't really want to hear anymore. People they don't want you to tell them about what's going on. But these communities, they actually sat down and listened. They ate together, they cooked together, they played together. That community effect protected their health. We now know that community effect helps your gut, helps, again, something that we haven't talked about, which is the fight or flight response. When we have been survivors, we were hunters and gatherers. We had this great response, a reflex called the flight or fight response. So you saw danger, you did one of two things. You ran or you fought, right? That's ingrained in us. Your body doesn't know that the guy just flipped you off, when you're on the turnpike, right? That because they didn't like the way you drove, or your wife yelled at you, or your boss said something, right? So when you have that unopposed stress that leads to all of your hormones that are preparing for you to be ready to do something, but really there's no danger, but your body perceives it as that, and it creates an inflammation because all the hormones that are increased when you have that inflammatory state, when you have that excited state, when it's unopposed like that, then it creates inflammation. When you have community, you have support, people that can help you through tough times, people that can tell you, hey, this is how we do things. When you have support, we know that decreases inflammation, helps your gut health. So that's kind of my 5-pillar method: purposeful living, a nutrition plan, movement, if at all possible, movement with purpose, and movement with spirituality. Spirituality is my 4th pillar, and 5th is community. Each of these individually are just monsters, meaning that they're packed full of helpful not just tips, but helpful criteria for your gut health. But when you put them together, they're not just 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, right? I mean, you can get an additive effect that's exponential. And that's the advantage I have. If you ask my kids, what is my favorite superhero? It'll never be Superman. It won't be Spider-Man. It's always Batman, because Batman's an ordinary dude, right? Who has all of these skills, right? Or, these little tools. And to me, a health hero of your gut has these 5 pillars, and they're just tools to make them superheroes of their health. And if you do this, I think it's really doable, and you can change your health, especially your gut health.
Wow, I love these. And this is, as a physical therapist, I've been incorporating these principles as well. And people don't realize they're so powerful. I just think this is so wonderful. Hey, Margie here. As a physical therapist, I know firsthand how important exercise is for our bones, overall health, and happiness. And unfortunately, there's a lot of confusion on what exercises are safe and effective for people with osteoporosis. That's why I created this handout that contains a 30-minute video where I explain the concepts so you understand the do's and don'ts when it comes to exercise. And this is important because this way you can go into any class and know what you should be doing and what you should avoid. Because too many people are doing exercises that actually increase their risk of spinal fractures. I also included videos of me demonstrating effective balance, posture, and weight-bearing exercises you can put into your day right away. So all you need to do to access this handout, it's free, is go to tinyurl.com/osteoporosis exercises. So it's tinyurl.com, again, /osteoporosis exercises, or you can click the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. Now, do you want to just share? Do you have like a story or something? I mean, what have you been seeing? Because what I also think is so amazing is that you are a gastroenterologist. So you are testing, you are working with people who have, serious issues. And when they incorporate this, you're actually, it's not like someone saying, oh, I feel better. You actually are seeing improvements in their condition. So you mind just sharing a little bit about what you've seen improve?
100%. I have patients, they come to me, and this is what happens in specialized medicine, like the one I practice in. So I'm a gastroenterologist, right? So I'm only supposed to ask about your gut and your bowel movements or abdominal pain. But something amazing happens when I talk about the rest of their body. How do you have trouble concentrating? Do you feel like there's not a lot of joy in every day when you're living? And when I make some of these suggestions, simple suggestions in their diet, simple suggestions in incorporating, one activity, each pillar every day, just one, it's transformative. Now, I don't mean to say, I should give you the caveat that if I think someone has an ulcer, I do an endoscopy. If I feel like, they may have bleeding in their gut, I don't just say, well, go meditate. I don't say that. We do an endoscopy, find out, hey, do you have colon cancer? Do you have colitis? Are there big medical issues that we have to deal with? Right? I exclude those, of course. But let's say that those are not there, that there are no warning signs. I talk to them about, hey, what is going on with the rest of your life? And what I've noticed again and again, this is not, you do this and the next day things are better, but literally in 2 or 3 weeks, they notice a dramatic difference. We tell them, this is what you can do. And I talk about it in my book here, The Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain, that you can incorporate each one of these pillars, right, every day in your life The easiest one that most people understand is food. And I tell them to just cut out simple things, cut out anything in a box or a can. I said, don't sweat the details. Just don't eat anything in a box or a can. Do something unbelievable. Go into the kitchen and actually not just drink a cup of coffee and talk to your friends, but cook, right? And cook with your family. So when I've done that, I've had patients with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's have unbelievable responses with the same medication, right? Same medication, same baseline medication, but now their symptoms are controlled. They're not having 6 bowel movements a day that are waking them up and having blood, but they're actually now being able to live the life. You have people who have symptoms that are suggestive of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And you and your audience may know that you have a bunch of bacteria that's sitting in your small intestine, which is where your food is being digested. And these little critters eat the food. And then they produce gas, and they produce stuff that gives you diarrhea. It's miserable. So we make simple changes in their diet. But I also talk about the 5 pillars. And with the combination, you see dramatic differences. What's happening in gastroenterology, in traditional gastroenterology, even now, today, is that we are just not incorporating the beautiful stuff that we have with holistic medicine, right? With functional medicine. I think that, listen, and if you're not an expert in it, if you're a practitioner who's listening, a traditional, let's say traditional medicine doctor, like a gastroenterologist or any other specialist, then get the help of a functional medicine. And we talked about this before our show. It says, I think there's something called being neutral or apathetic, let's say. But there's antipathy in many of my colleagues, unfortunately, right? I mean, people say, it's just all hogwash. But you see again and again, relative miracles that happen that traditional medicine is not solving. With my pills, with my proton pump inhibitors, with my pro-motility agents, with my, 5-ASA, there's all these medications. They can be life-saving, and I prescribe them. I of course I do. But we are still missing huge numbers of folks, up to 50%, sometimes even more, of patients that are just getting no relief. So I think the concert, right? It's like a beautiful orchestra. It doesn't just take, the strings or the horns. It takes everybody together, kind of in a beautiful concert that work together. And I think that in gastroenterology, you can see some of the amazing stories and successes that we do by just incorporating some of the principles we talk about. They're pretty simple. They're doable. One of the things I talk about to patients is that it's not, the changes are not so unbelievably difficult that you're not capable of doing it, that they're easy and they're actionable steps, but you have to do it consistently and you'll see a dramatic change, right? People think that they have Mount Everest in front of them and say, Doc, I've been doing this for 50 years. How am I going to change? And it's always the first step. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's really true. You take a first step, but then you give them a prescription, of sorts of the 5 pillars that I talk about in my book. It's like you just start slow and we'll give you recipes. We'll give you techniques of meditation and spirituality. We'll give you techniques in which you can find a community. Maybe you're single. Maybe you don't have a family. You're in, New York City or in Dallas, Texas. You're single. Like, where am I going to find the community? You can find it with your work. You can find it if you like sports. And listen, a lot of people poo-poo the online community, but you can find it online. So there's so many places that you could really find ways to be able to incorporate these pillars. But success stories are everywhere if you have an open mind as a practitioner and if you have an open mind as a patient. And all of your listeners, clearly they're listening because they have an open mind, they're engaged. And I would encourage you to talk to, folks that are suffering, because often they may not be open to techniques that are not just traditional medicine of give me a pill, give me a procedure, give me one more thing to do that I can just, inject myself with. Like, now we've got these GLP agonists and people like, I want to just take those and, change everything. So we have to look beyond that. And then I'm so glad that people like yourself are incorporating this in your practice and you're showing folks how to do it. It's amazing.
So tell us, you have 2 amazing things. Your book tell us the date it's coming out, but people can pre-order it because I can't wait to read it. What I love is that there's so many tools and that, with a simple book, you can really change your life, change your brain, change your bones. I mean, it's really, so tell us about the book. And also you have a webinar also to give people more information and more tools. So you want to just tell us about both of those, when the book's coming out and the webinar?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, the book is really a labor of love for me. Talked about it was really to be able to get some, for me, if I could give to my dad and say, Dad, if you could have done this, 5-10 years ago before your stroke. So the book is called Heal Your Gut, Save Your Brain. It's published by the Mayo Clinic Press. So, they were very, very specific in looking at the sources. So it's really, I love the fact that they did that they have a lot of review from multiple reputable doctors. So it's being released October 1st, 2024, by the Mayo Clinic Press. And we also have a webinar that we can give a link to. The webinar really goes into detail about what I talked about today, in really providing even more detail about the link between the gut and the brain, and actionable steps you can take every single day, right? To be able to incorporate into your life, and not this difficult programs. The webinar is a great introduction for you to be able to figure out how to be able to make these changes in your life. So I would love if you could check it out and give Margie and I some feedback on what you think about it.
Yeah.
And a book you can get anywhere books are sold, so Amazon, Barnes and Noble, if you go to the bookstore, if you go to our website, Ask Dr. Nandi, so askdrnandi.com, we'll be there as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's so exciting because as you said, it's full of tools and they're actionable, and you do one step, you move to the next step, and you get momentum. And I've seen the same thing, so much wonderful success when you take that approach. So yeah, I just love everything you said. I'm really excited. Please let us know. I want to hear. There's nothing that makes me happier than saying, I heard Dr. Nandi. I got the book. I'm feeling so much better. So I'm excited that it's just really wonderful when you create a book and you spread it out to the world, and then you get all this feedback, how lives have changed. So kudos to you for putting this, for giving back to your dad, but really making a big difference for people in the world like you do. So I think this approach is incredible. And is there any last minute things you want to share with everybody before we end? This has been so.
I just want to congratulate you on all your success and the community you've created of folks that have empowered themselves to really be able to take charge of your health. It's a privilege to be part of that community, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Oh, well, I've just really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time, and good luck with the new book. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Nandi as much as I did, and now have some new tools that you can put into your life to improve your gut, your brain, your bones, your mood, and just your overall health. All the links that Dr. Nandi talked about to his new book and his webinar will be in the show notes. And the book comes out in October, but you can pre-order it now. And make sure to check out my handout on exercises to improve your posture, balance, and reduce your risk of falls. So lots of great information. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.